I never thought that giving my daughter-in-law a credit card would end up being a criminal investigation. The moment Simone's Amex Platinum declined on a $2,100 Hermes perfume set after she'd already blown through $75,384.19 of my money, she looked over at the cashier with a tight smile. That smile faded fast when the fraud alert lit up the screen at Bloomingdale's on 59th and Lexington. I was 10 feet away, pretending to sample a tester, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. Security whispered something into his mic, the cashier stiffened, and Simone's fingers froze mid-reach for the bag. I exhaled. That account had been mine alone for 23 years. I added her as an authorized user 6 months ago, right after Marcus said she was handling more of the family errands since I wasn't driving much. I didn't like it, but I agreed. Just a card, small limit, emergency use. Until last week, when I logged in and saw 4 Louis Vuitton charges in one day, all in Simone's size. I said nothing. I just flagged the account and waited. She didn't even notice me across the counter. Her attention locked on her phone, probably texting Marcus, maybe checking if another card would work. She had 5, all tucked inside that white crocodile bag I saw in the April statement, for $6,925. I leaned on the glass counter and asked the associate for a free spray card, just loud enough to be heard. Simone's head whipped around. Her eyes met mine. That was the real charge. Not the money, that expression. I left before security could escort her out. Before Marcus could call and defend her like he always did, saying it was just a gift or a misunderstanding. I didn't need the apology. I needed the paper trail. And I had it. I'd already pulled down 6 months of statements, tagged every charge, and booked an appointment at Chase for the next morning, 9:45 a.m., before the Friday wire deadline. The card wasn't blank. Neither was I. Just 5 weeks earlier, on October 2nd, my son Marcus had casually told his wife, "Go ahead and use Mama's card. She's got plenty," not knowing I'd been quietly monitoring the statements from my corner unit at 212 Lenox Terrace ever since I added Simone as an authorized user last spring. They were sitting across from me in my living room at the time, talking over each other about needing new patio furniture for hosting season. Simone had a tablet open to a West Elm cart, and Marcus held my hand, rubbing it gently like I was his little old lady instead of the woman who'd put him through Columbia and co-signed his first mortgage. I didn't answer. I just nodded, lips tight, and watched them leave with the same breeze of entitlement they always brought into my apartment. I had a system by then. After dinner, I'd sit at my desk with a yellow pad, logging into my Chase portal, checking transactions against the calendar. I kept a separate sheet just for Simone. Purple ink. A way to keep her offenses from bleeding into everything else. The first week of October showed bursts of activity. Designer sneakers from Milan, 2 hotel stays in Brooklyn with no known events attached, back-to-back Uber rides between Midtown and Soho at strange hours. No car seats, no family dinners, just solo shopping routes mapped out in digital breadcrumbs. I printed the statements and filed them in a manila folder under my tax drawer. Then I flagged a $12,000 charge that seemed out of place, a wire to someone named Jared Weston, no address, no note. I called Marcus to ask if he recognized the name. He said, "Mom, that's probably a vendor Simone used. Don't worry about it. We'll settle up after the holidays." He always said we, but I knew exactly who we never included. So I opened a spreadsheet, made columns, date, vendor, amount, description, category, notes. I logged everything. If I was going to act, I needed records that didn't blink. The kind of records that speak in court when people pretend they can't remember. That night, I reread the credit card agreement and underlined the phrase, "Cardholder is solely responsible for charges made by authorized users." That was me. They could sink my credit, siphon my savings, maybe even sell the apartment under my feet if I didn't draw a line. So I did. I called Chase Fraud Department at 7:42 p.m. Case file opened, account flagged for review, transactions under investigation. Next step would be escalation. I was on hold for 18 minutes, and I wrote down the agent's name. Noreen L., badge number 54,481. It wasn't the first time I'd been treated like a faceless wallet. Last Christmas, they left me off the Aspen trip invite, and in August, they forgot to include me on the deed transfer for the brownstone I paid to renovate. This reckless shopping spree was just the final spit in my face. The Aspen photos appeared 2 days after the holiday, full of white slopes and wine cellars. Simone in fur-lined boots she didn't own in November. I wasn't angry they went. I was angry they lied. Marcus said they were keeping things simple that year, suggested I skip the gift exchange to save my energy. Meanwhile, they were drinking champagne in a hot tub with Simone's sisters, and my grandson was snowboarding in gear I never saw again. Then came the brownstone. A 3-floor beauty on 127th, built in 1899. Cracked facade, but solid bones. I fronted the renovation costs, $218,000 wired in stages, on the promise that Marcus would transfer partial ownership to me once the final inspection cleared. When the deed came back in September, my name was missing. I asked about it. He looked surprised, said, "We thought you didn't want the responsibility." Simone said it was an oversight, and they'd fix it on the next filing. That filing never happened. Now this card. This brazen, casual theft dressed up as family budgeting. Simone didn't even try to cover her tracks. There were Uber Eats orders from their Tribeca rental at 1:14 a.m., Cartier receipts for matching love bracelet, a payment to a Botox clinic listed under a vague wellness code. I tracked every single one, logged the timestamps, cross-checked the addresses. I wasn't humiliated because they tricked me. I was humiliated because I had known better and still let it happen. A mother wants to believe her son sees her as more than leverage. But Marcus had spent the last year acting like my savings were his hedge fund. Simone just streamlined the withdrawals. I took the brownstone file from the cabinet and placed it beside the credit card folder. Same pen, same pattern. Promises made, paperwork missing. No more warnings. At 10:03 a.m. the next morning, I filed a title inquiry request through the New York City Department of Finance website. Request number 93817Z. Confirmation sent to my email. Expected turnaround, 5 business days. And while the site processed, I called my friend Harriet from First Corinthian, retired legal secretary. Asked her if she still had the name of that estate lawyer in Harlem she used when her nephew tried to sell her husband's coin collection behind her back. She said yes. Harold Bennett said he didn't blink. 3 days after the Bloomingdale's incident, Simone texted me a half-hearted, "Sorry if there was confusion," while Marcus insisted it was just temporary borrowing. But my Chase private client manager, Olivia Hinton, confirmed they'd made 127 purchases in under 2 weeks, some charged at 3 a.m. They weren't careless. They were methodical. Simone had a system: mornings for cosmetics and wellness spas, afternoons for boutique appointments, and late nights for restaurant tabs and app-based transfers labeled with emoji. The timestamps painted a life of luxury, lived on someone else's clock. My clock. I had Olivia pull a PDF export with merchant codes, location data, and time logs. She added internal notations: unusual pattern, high-risk merchant, inconsistent spending behavior. When she sent it over, I printed the full 34 pages and laid them out on my kitchen table, one after another, forming a long arc of theft that stretched from my sugar jar to the windowsill. It wasn't a spree, it was a campaign. Marcus called again that evening, his voice low and strained like he was the injured party. "You know Simone gets anxious. Shopping calms her," he said, as if that excused fraud. "We always meant to pay you back, but there was no payment schedule, no apology. Just that same soft-voiced entitlement I'd spent too many years excusing as stress or work pressure or marital tension." I asked him flat out, "Did you tell her she could use the card without limits?" He paused, long enough to confirm everything. "I thought you trusted us," he finally said. "I trusted you to act like a son, not a client," I said, and hung up before the guilt script could start. That night, I began matching the charges to social media posts. Simone wasn't discreet. Her Instagram was full of tagged boutiques and rooftop brunches, every outfit traceable to a purchase I had already logged. She wore the theft-like fashion. I emailed Olivia at 6:41 a.m. the next morning, asked her to flag all transactions between September 20th and October 10th as contested pending review. She escalated the request to the Fraud Recovery Division. Internal case ID, County Route 544,319. Processing freeze placed on all outgoing wires over $500. Olivia scheduled a follow-up call for the following Monday, 2 p.m. I printed the confirmation email, slid it into the file, and opened a fresh sheet in the spreadsheet. New tab, Instagram evidence. By October 12th, I'd retained attorney Harold Bennett, estate planner and fraud litigator out of Harlem, who filed an emergency freeze on all transfers linked to my name, including the disputed $130,000 Amex account. Harold didn't ask me if I was sure. He didn't sigh, scold, or soften his tone. He just listened as I read down the list, transaction by transaction, pausing only to ask for supporting documents. I had them ready, labeled folders, dates marked, screenshots annotated with merchant codes, and delivery addresses. When I mentioned the notarized deed filing from August, he stopped and leaned forward. "That's actionable," he said, "not just civil, criminal if proven false." I watched him take notes on legal pad paper with a sharp pencil and a steadiness that gave me back my breath. He filed the emergency petition electronically through NYSCEF by noon. Docket confirmation came back at 12:48 p.m. Index no 450,332/24. We had our first hearing scheduled in 8 days. Meanwhile, he requested a freeze on brokerage access through Merrill, sent a letter of notification to Chase's legal department, and contacted Amex fraud investigations directly through his secure channel. Within 2 hours, the Platinum account was locked to new charges, pending identity verification for all recent transactions. He also called a forensic CPA to begin a line-item audit, said if they'd used my money for even one business-related transfer under false authority, we could file for wire fraud. Intent plus misuse, he said, and you've got both. When I asked what Simone's defense might be, he didn't hesitate. They'll say it was family money. That you gave permission informally, or implied it, happens every day, which is why we gather facts and shut down sentiment. That line stuck with me. While Harold handled the legal barricades, I called the Amex concierge line and revoked Simone's authorized user status. That change alone triggered a security review. Their fraud specialist confirmed that several large purchases were split into incremental transactions to avoid triggering alerts. Classic layering tech, not an accident. Before we ended the call, Harold told me to open a new trust, irrevocable, with myself as the sole trustee. He said it was the safest way to protect my assets until the dust settled. I made the appointment at Chase for the following Tuesday, 11:30 a.m. private office. Olivia would be present to witness. By 6:15 p.m., all 5 of Simone's cards were inactive. My phone buzzed once with a failed transaction alert from Uber Black. It felt like a hinge turning. That same night, I received a screenshot from my neighbor Tasha, Building 3B, showing a group chat between Simone and her cousin titled Maxing MIL's Card, with laughing emojis and a shopping list titled Haul Before It Gets Flagged. Tasha didn't even preface it with the message, just the image, sent at 9:12 p.m., no caption, no comment. She knew I'd understand. The group chat included Simone, her cousin Janelle, and 2 women I didn't recognize. They'd been cataloging purchases like trophies, handbag, spa weekend, bottle service, matching leather luggage. Next to each item, a checkmark, a photo, or a snide remark. Under the heading, Big Ticket Still Pending, someone had typed, Balenciaga couches, or bust, LOL. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I forwarded it to Harold without adding anything. He responded 5 minutes later with 2 words, save everything. The most insulting part wasn't the theft. It was the glee. Simone hadn't slipped up in secret. She'd orchestrated it, cheered it on, invited witnesses. She called me MIL like I was a prop, not a person. In another message she'd written, she won't notice unless Marcus says something. Just act sweet if she calls. Under that, a gif of someone fake crying. I took a screenshot of the screenshot, saved both to an encrypted folder on my laptop, and backed them up to a thumb drive I keep taped under the drawer in my desk. The original thread, according to Tasha, was now deleted, but the image had metadata, time-stamped, unaltered, legally admissible. I didn't reply to Simone's earlier apology text. Instead, I sent a formal cease and desist through Harold's office, delivered by certified mail with return receipt. It stated that all financial activity conducted using my name, credit, or assets without express written authorization must end immediately. Failure to comply would escalate to civil litigation and criminal referral. I checked the USPS tracking number the next morning, 9405511899563090132704. Delivered at 10:47 a.m. Signed for by S. Whitman. She was still using my name, still pretending to belong. Harold forwarded the group chat transcript to the forensic accountant, who added a new line to the report. Evidence of premeditation and organized misuse. That one sentence reframed everything. We weren't dealing with impulse or confusion. We were documenting a conspiracy. At 3:28 p.m., Olivia emailed me confirming that all disputed charges had been officially marked under investigation. That meant Simone could no longer claim ignorance. The paper trail was public now. I went through every transaction line by line using Excel and documented every location, timestamp, and receipt cross-reference. I highlighted red flags like the $8,400 charge at Saks, where Simone had me banned as a co-signer on the account. That entry came with a gift note that read, "To me, from me, Kissmark," and was delivered to their Tribeca address, my address on file, her lifestyle and practice. When I tried to log into the Saks account that afternoon, my email returned an error. I called the customer service line and learned I'd been removed as the primary contact 2 months prior, replaced by Simone using a Gmail address with my initials. That alone told me everything I needed about intention. The spreadsheet grew into something more than a ledger. It became my defense, my weapon. I logged merchant category codes, return timestamps, delivery confirmations, and IP addresses when available. Olivia walked me through Amex's audit tools, and Harold sent over a document checklist used in financial elder abuse cases. I wasn't a victim. I was a client building a case. One charge led me to a florist in Soho. I called, pretending to be confirming delivery times. The woman on the phone casually mentioned the bouquet had been sent with a card saying, "Thank you for keeping our spot open. Future business coming soon." I wrote that down. Then I looked up the address. It wasn't a residence. It was a showroom, Lux Living Futures, the same LLC Marcus had name-dropped once when he said they were consulting on interiors. Another line showed 3 separate payments to a business services firm that specialized in property staging. When I called the number, no one answered, but the voicemail mentioned units available for corporate leasing. I emailed Harold with the subject line, "Funds used for commercial gain?" He responded within the hour, "Yes, strengthens our position. Keep digging." By the end of that week, I had sorted the transactions into 6 categories: retail luxury, real estate services, personal wellness, cash transfers, entertainment, and miscellaneous. That last one included things like a psychic reading charged in 2 installments and an app called Secure Vault that billed monthly. I printed a 37-page report, added a binder clip, and labeled the cover Asset Misuse Log V1. I also placed a red sticky note on the front with a question Harold had asked me early on: who benefited and how often? At 4:12 p.m., Olivia texted to confirm Chase's legal review team had accepted my evidence file into their internal case system. Next steps: escalation to recovery assessment, review meeting to be scheduled. When confronted, Simone said, quote, "Marcus said it was okay," and Marcus shrugged, saying, "It's not like you needed the money anyway," while calling my diligence paranoid and suggesting I rest more instead of micromanaging. We were in my living room, my space, my chair, my roof, and yet I felt like a guest in a house someone else was already remodeling. Simone sat on the edge of the sofa, legs crossed tightly, phone in hand the entire time. Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, posture casual, in a way that only made the disrespect feel rehearsed. I handed them a printed summary of the transactions. Neither reached for it. "I kept records," I said. "Each charge is documented. You told her to use the card. Fine. But you didn't say she could sign a new lease in my name or purchase assets tied to an LLC your name isn't on." Simone rolled her eyes, still scrolling. "Marcus said you'd be dramatic. You always act like we're trying to rob you." I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid a second document across the table. This one the notarized deed from the brownstone, printed beside my original wire receipts. I asked Marcus why my name wasn't added. He didn't answer at first, just stared at the wall clock, as though it could offer a better excuse. "I was going to fix that," he said eventually. "It's not like it changes anything. You still live here." No apology. No acknowledgement of the lie. Just deflection, as if ownership meant nothing but paperwork. Simone finally looked up, saw the printed email from Olivia about the account freeze, and said, "You're really doing all this over some credit card swipes? That's cold. You used my funds to furnish a property I don't own and possibly operate a business I didn't agree to," I replied. "This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear." I stood, walked to my desk, and retrieved a voice recorder I'd purchased the day before. I placed it on the table, pressed play, and let them hear the florist's voicemail, Simone's note attached to the bouquet thanking someone for holding a spot. Their expressions changed, not all at once, but like a slow drip of realization. "Are you recording us now?" Marcus asked. "No," I said, "but I'm documenting everything, because what I need next won't be settled in a living room." By the time they left, Harold had already filed a request for a formal mediation. Meeting proposed, October 30th, 2 p.m. location, Chase Boardroom, Midtown. On October 18th, Olivia emailed me the monthly statement showing 5 cash advances to an unknown LLC, Lux Living Futures, owned by Simone's brother, and my building's concierge, Mr. Rowland, showed me surveillance footage of a furniture delivery, $19,000 worth, to their new Tribeca rental, all charged to me. The cash advances were masked as quote, business development expenses, each withdrawn just under the reporting threshold, staggered across different branches in Lower Manhattan. Olivia included the routing numbers in her report, all tied back to one account, Lux Living Futures Holdings. I searched the state business registry. It had been registered in June, 3 weeks after I added Simone to the Amex, and listed its mailing address as a co-working space downtown. The registered agent was listed as Jalen Peters. I remembered that name from a birthday card Simone once handed me, signed, "Love from all of us, J, S, and M." The camera footage from the building lobby showed the delivery clearly. 5 movers wheeling in a custom Italian leather sectional, marble-top dining table, 6 velvet chairs, and a wall-mounted electric fireplace, none of which had ever crossed my threshold. Mr. Rowland said Simone gave them access under my unit's service code, claiming the delivery was on my behalf. She even signed the logbook using my full name, in shaky cursive that didn't even match my license signature. I asked for a copy of the footage. Mr. Rowland burned it onto a disc and handed it to me discreetly in a blank case. "This isn't the first time I've seen her walk in like she owns the place," he muttered. "But it's the first time I realized she might be stealing it from you." I added the disc to the growing file I kept in the fireproof lockbox under my bed. Then I forwarded the footage to Harold with a note. "They're moving my money into their home." He responded with a 3-word email. "Wire fraud confirmed." That same afternoon, the forensic accountant flagged one of the cash advances as a transfer made 2 hours before the Bloomingdale's incident, meaning they knew the funds were drying up and tried to drain what they could before I noticed. I didn't confront them. I didn't text. I documented. At 6:52 p.m., Olivia submitted an internal escalation request to Amex Corporate Security under Section 4, Elder Exploitation Risk. That shifted the review to a compliance-level investigation. Mandatory reporting status triggered. SAR filing underway. Regulatory clock started 72 hours. The following day, Harold confirmed Simone had forged my e-signature on a durable power of attorney, dated August 14th, granting herself access to my brokerage and savings accounts, notarized by her coworker at Loft 42 PR, an act carrying criminal liability. The document had been submitted electronically to my bank through their digital portal. Harold obtained a copy through a formal records request. I examined the PDF carefully. The signature block showed my full name in stylized script, but the metadata told the truth. It had been input using a template signature, time-stamped from an IP address registered to Simone's office. She hadn't even used a private connection. That level of carelessness revealed her confidence. She thought I'd never look. The notary listed was a woman named Brielle Cardenas. LinkedIn showed her as a junior brand manager at Loft 42. No legal credentials, no state license on record. Harold confirmed it. Not a registered notary in New York. Which meant the notarization was not just invalid, it was fraudulent. He printed the relevant statutes, highlighted the applicable penalty clauses, and added the forged POA to our formal complaint packet. I called Chase's Elder Protection Unit at 10:18 a.m., gave them the file number, and reported the forgery. The representative escalated the call to a supervisor, who logged the offense and scheduled a formal review interview for me on October 23rd. They advised me not to confront Simone directly about the forged POA, to avoid giving her room to destroy digital evidence. I had no intention of warning her. Harold requested a preservation hold on all financial activity linked to that POA. Within 2 hours, my brokerage account issued a hold notice, freezing outbound transfers pending identity verification. The next scheduled automatic withdrawal, $4,250 labeled Lux Living Consulting Fee, was blocked at 1:03 p.m. That gave us a timestamp and a motive. At Harold's instruction, I visited the nearest NYPD precinct to file a police report for identity theft. Report number 112399 FRA. The officer on duty, a young woman who didn't ask unnecessary questions, took down every detail, photocopied the document, and handed me a stamped copy. I left with a folded paper in my bag and a case number I could hold up like armor. At 5:17 p.m., Harold submitted a formal complaint to the district attorney's Elder Abuse Task Force, attaching the forged POA, metadata analysis, and notarization fraud. He copied me on the email. The subject line was simple: power of attorney, criminal forgery enclosed. On October 21st, I received notice from my HOA that Marcus and Simone had submitted a proposal to convert my guest unit into a short-term rental for supplemental income, claiming I had given verbal permission to vacate by year-end. The letter came folded neatly in my mailbox, printed on HOA letterhead, with language far too polished to be drafted overnight. The proposal cited recent conversations with the property owner and claimed an agreement in principle had been reached regarding subletting. I read it twice before calling the HOA president, Ms. Denise Carroll, a retired attorney who had known me since I moved into Lenox Terrace over 2 decades ago. She sounded confused but firm. Simone submitted it in person, Denise said. Your name was attached, but no signed statement. I flagged it for discussion at the next board meeting. I told her plainly. I never authorized anything. There would be no rental, no agreement, and certainly no verbal arrangement to vacate. Denise apologized and withdrew the proposal from consideration. She promised to issue a statement at the next meeting, clarifying my sole authority over the unit. I thanked her, then hung up and called Harold. He asked for a scan of the notice, plus any building access records showing unauthorized entries into my guest unit. I contacted Mr. Rowland again. He checked the logbooks and confirmed Simone had used my guest key fob twice in the past month. Entries logged at 8:11 p.m. and 7:32 a.m., both on weekends when I wasn't home. The records were captured in the building's security system. He printed the access report and handed it to me directly. Inside the unit, nothing looked stolen. But the closet smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, and one of the kitchen drawers held a fresh box of Nespresso pods I didn't buy. Someone had been staying there, quietly, as if testing ownership. Harold compiled the HOA proposal, key fob logs, and guest unit photos into a new file labeled Real Property Misrepresentation. He called it a pattern. First the brownstone, then the credit, now this. They've made your assets their staging ground, he said. This wasn't about one account. It's systemic. I wrote a formal notice of restricted access, delivered it to the building manager and HOA in hard copy, signed and dated. At 4:38 p.m., I had the locks on the guest unit changed by a licensed locksmith. Invoice paid in cash, receipt stapled into my binder. That Sunday, as I sat alone in St. Paul's church kitchen during coffee hour, I overheard Simone laughing with her mother about old people hoarding money, and though my hands trembled, I stood up knowing I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. They hadn't seen me. I'd stepped away from the table to wash a plate, let the water run longer than necessary to clear the oil from the potato casserole. The laughter came sharp, casual, the kind you use when you think power is permanent. Simone's voice carried even in a whisper. She's sitting on all that equity for what? A casket? Her mother replied, and Simone added, I told Marcus she's got 1 foot in the marble garden already. I didn't confront them. I dried my hands, returned the plate to the stack, and stepped out into the corridor without a word. That kitchen had seen me bring Sunday pies for fundraisers, fold napkins for funeral receptions, hold my grandson on my hip when he was still small enough to fall asleep during service. It had never heard me sob, but it nearly did that morning. Instead, I walked into Reverend Clarence's office and closed the door behind me. He looked up from his desk and saw my face. "Do you need me to listen or to act?" he asked. I handed him a summary of the financial abuse, 3 pages stapled and tabbed. "Both," I said, "and I may need a witness." He read it slowly. No interruption. When he finished, he nodded once. "I'll be at the mediation," he said. "You won't sit alone." I didn't tell him about the kitchen conversation. I didn't need to. That laughter had already burned itself into my spine. That was the moment I stopped seeking reconciliation. Not revenge, just restoration, without illusion. They saw me as an obstacle, a vault they could open with guilt and proximity. I saw them now for what they'd become, opportunists with my blood in their mouths. That afternoon, I updated my estate documents using Harold's secure client portal. I revoked Marcus's designation as financial power of attorney and medical proxy. He would receive formal notice within 48 hours, delivered by certified mail with acknowledgement required. At 6:21 p.m., I signed the revocation digitally using DocuSign. Confirmation ID E4C987712 Whitman. The system time-stamped it automatically. The law now recognized what I had finally accepted. I asked Harold to call for a mediated resolution meeting at the Chase boardroom on 57th Street for October 30th at 2 p.m., inviting Marcus, Simone, their attorney, Olivia from Chase, and Reverend Clarence, who'd offered to be a witness. Harold didn't hesitate. He drafted the formal meeting notice with a neutral tone but unshakable structure. List of topics, required documents, ground rules for conduct. No phones, no recordings unless consented, no delays. Marcus's attorney responded within 24 hours, agreed to the time, requested a collaborative approach, which Harold translated aloud to me as damage control. Simone didn't respond directly, but her email signature had changed. She now signed her name as Simone Whitman Peters, a hyphen I'd never seen, paired with a new tagline beneath her title, Luxury Asset Strategist. I printed that signature and added it to the folder. Small things reveal ambition more clearly than speeches. The Chase boardroom wasn't a courtroom, but it had the feel of one: glass walls, long table, a view of the skyline that made everyone look temporary. Olivia reserved the space personally. She knew what this meeting meant. It wasn't about apologies. It was about exposure. The seating was deliberate. I sat at one end, with Harold on my right and Reverend Clarence to my left. Simone and Marcus across from me, their attorney at the midpoint, looking more nervous than either of them. I brought a navy folder marked evidence, the kind with metal fasteners and index tabs. Harold laid out the order: transactions first, forged documents second, property misuse last. Olivia had access to the screens and confirmed she'd prepared internal reports that aligned with my claims. Her tone never rose. She was precise, almost cold, which I appreciated. Warmth had been used too often to manipulate me. Before the meeting began, Harold handed out physical copies of the mediation agreement. One paragraph bolded in red. All parties acknowledge that the presentation of material evidence may result in civil or criminal proceedings. No one objected. Simone flipped through the pages without reading. Marcus barely glanced up. The time was 1:57 p.m. when everyone signed in. Harold clicked his pen twice, looked at me, and said, "It's your floor, Mrs. Whitman." I opened the folder, pulled out the first tab document, and spoke clearly. "This is a timeline of every charge made in my name without consent, including receipts, screenshots, and transfers. We'll begin with September 17th. Inside the glass-walled conference room with the Chase logo gleaming behind us, I placed a navy folder marked Evidence on the table, calmly announcing I'd prepared a timeline of all charges, transactions, falsified documents, and security video stills. No one moved. Even the attorney across from me, Marcus and Simone's latest hire, seemed unsure where to look. I opened the folder without rush, slid the first set of pages across the polished table. A ledger of unauthorized credit charges, color-coded by type and date. Olivia confirmed each entry with the Chase internal system. Her tone remained neutral, but her posture wasn't. She leaned forward now. Next came the Amex statements, cross-referenced against Simone's own public social media posts. I placed the printouts side by side. September 26th, I said, tapping the receipt. Louis Vuitton, 5 items, $6,230. Time-stamped 2:07 p.m. Then the photo. Simone, mirror selfie, tags visible, captioned, "Retail therapy does wonders nail care." Marcus shifted slightly but said nothing. I kept going. The florist invoice, complete with Simone's note. "Thank you for holding the space. We'll be growing fast." Harold inserted that into the record under commercial misuse. Then the notarized power of attorney, the forged one, with metadata showing it had been submitted from Simone's work IP. Harold turned that page around slowly, like he wanted every person in the room to feel the weight of it. Simone barely looked at the documents. Her focus stayed on the window, chin lifted as if she could stare her way out of the moment. Marcus glanced at Reverend Clarence once, then lowered his eyes. When I presented the security footage from my building, delivery of furniture, entry into my guest unit, key fob logs, they both sat still. No denials, no rebuttal. Their attorney cleared his throat but said nothing. He had seen enough to know this wasn't a negotiation. It was containment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't editorialize. I followed the tabs, one by one, until all 12 sections had been introduced into the record. Olivia took notes on each, marking Chase's internal compliance responses and next steps. Then Harold pushed forward the final exhibit, a notarized ledger of estate authorizations. As of last week, he said, Mr. Marcus Whitman has been formally removed from all roles, rights, and designations tied to Mrs. Whitman's trust, healthcare directive, and power of attorney. The only sound was the quiet hum of the central air unit. One by one, I laid out screenshots of Simone's texts, the doctored POA with mismatched font metadata, a notarization from an unlicensed notary, the LLC registration tied to Simone's brother, and the footage of them unloading my leather recliner into their moving truck. The room didn't erupt. It compressed. You could feel the shift. Not loud, but sharp. Simone's attorney leaned in, reading the screen captures with a tightening jaw. Olivia confirmed that the notary, Brielle Cardenas, had no official registration in New York State, and that Simone's digital submission of the POA had been routed through an unsecured IP. The bank's internal fraud department had labeled it high risk and already escalated it to federal compliance. I passed around the LLC filing next, highlighting the ownership by Jalen Peters and the registration date, just 3 weeks after Simone gained access to my accounts. Funds from my brokerage were used to seed a shell company registered under false pretense. I said, not loud but clear, none of this was accidental. Then came the video stills, screenshots from Mr. Rowland's lobby footage, each time-stamped, each showing movers wheeling out furniture from my guest unit. My recliner, my oak end table, even a framed photo of my late husband, wrapped in a moving blanket like some forgotten prop. Marcus's signature appeared on the building log. Simone had smiled for the camera. Reverend Clarence, silent until then, placed his hand flat on the table and said, I've known this woman for 32 years. She buried her husband and raised her son without complaint. If this is how you treat her, then it's not misunderstanding, it's theft. Simone's lips parted as if to answer, but no sound came. Her attorney reached for her wrist, gently pressing it down to stop whatever she'd been about to say. Olivia turned to me. Based on the documentation provided and our internal audit, Chase will reverse all fraudulent charges and initiate a compliance refund. A secure elder protection trust will be established to prevent future access. Harold slid the final document forward. Revocation of power of attorney, prepared and notarized, awaiting signature. This replaces the forged version, he said. Signed here, it becomes enforceable immediately. Simone didn't look up. Marcus reached for the pen with a hesitation I recognized. Not guilt, but fear. Not of me, but of consequences finally standing in the same room. When Olivia confirmed to the room that the card had been forcibly closed and funds would be reversed into a secured elder protection trust, Simone's face went white. Marcus stood up yelling, and Harold simply slid a revocation of power of attorney across the table for notarization. Olivia didn't flinch. Her voice held no venom, just policy. Effective immediately, the Chase Elder Services Division will redirect reimbursed funds into a controlled fiduciary account managed by a licensed trust officer. No access will be granted to former authorized users or familial proxies unless court-ordered. She paused to confirm the case ID aloud, EP 341109, and documented the compliance officer's name in the official minutes. Every word she spoke added another layer of distance between me and the people who once called themselves my family. Marcus pushed back his chair, palms flat on the table. You can't just. This is family money. You raised me in that house. His voice cracked, not from remorse but from disbelief that his grip was finally slipping. I did raise you, I said, but I didn't raise you to siphon your way through my retirement. Simone stood up too, but not to defend. She grabbed her bag and began thumbing furiously through her phone. Her attorney whispered something, but she ignored him. When Harold pushed the notarized revocation toward Marcus again, she snatched her coat and muttered, "This is garbage. We'll contest it." Reverend Clarence, seated beside me like a stone, spoke without turning. "The only thing being contested here is your entitlement." Marcus didn't sign right away. He looked at me the way a man looks at a door closing, like it owed him more time. Then, with one curt motion, he picked up the pen and scrawled his name. Harold stamped it. Official as of 3:43 p.m. With the document notarized, Harold passed me the new trust summary. Short-term fiduciary management by Chase, periodic oversight, beneficiary protections locked by clause. We'd already started the process days earlier. This was the final seal. No one in that room could touch a dollar of it now. Simone was already halfway to the door when Marcus finally asked, "So what now? You just erase us?" I didn't answer. I collected the folder, signed the ledger, and handed Olivia the final consent for Chase to proceed. The silence after was heavier than shouting. In front of everyone, Reverend Clarence asked, "Do you have anything to say to your mother, Marcus?" And when silence fell, Simone stormed out. Marcus mumbled something about misunderstandings, and Olivia said, "We'll be filing a SAR with the Financial Crimes Division." The Reverend didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The question landed heavier than the folder of evidence. For a second, even Simone paused in the doorway, but when Marcus didn't speak, she turned and left. No apology, no defense, just the clipped rhythm of heels against tile and a glass door swinging shut behind her. The kind of exit that avoids consequences, not confrontation. Marcus sat back down, but his posture had changed. Shoulders rounded, hands no longer defiant. He looked older than he had 30 minutes ago. Or maybe it was the first time I saw him, clearly. Not through the lens of mothering, but as a man who had chosen silence over truth. "You know this wasn't just her," he said, eyes on the table. "I know who signed the withdrawals," I replied. "I know who moved the furniture. I know who let her believe I wouldn't notice." Olivia, still composed, flipped to a new section in her binder. "Given the nature of the forged documentation and associated LLC misuse," she began, "we are required to submit a suspicious activity report. The federal compliance team will notify FinCEN. This is not discretionary." Harold nodded, already prepared. "You'll also receive a notice from the DA's office. Elder exploitation involving POA fraud falls within their jurisdiction. Whether they pursue charges is separate from what we'll file civilly." Marcus blinked. No protest. No questions. Just the slow awareness that the room no longer revolved around him. His lawyer, who hadn't spoken since the first document hit the table, leaned toward him and whispered something urgent, legal, probably designed to soften what couldn't be undone. The Reverend remained seated beside me, hands folded. "I've known Alara longer than you've been married," he said. "She gives quietly and remembers who took loudly. She's not cruel, but she is done." Marcus looked at me again, waiting for softness. I gave him honesty instead. "We're past explanations. This was never a misunderstanding. It was an investment you never thought I'd audit." At 4:06 p.m., Olivia submitted the SAR request. Confirmation number printed, logged, and acknowledged. By Halloween morning, the funds had been restored, the locks on my Lenox Terrace unit changed, Marcus's name removed from my estate plan, and I dropped my new engraved mailbox key. Mrs. Alara Whitman, sole trustee, into my coat pocket and walked into my future. The locksmith arrived at 9:07 a.m., early and efficient. He didn't ask why I was replacing the locks, didn't comment on the double set I requested for both the main and guest doors. He worked quietly, finishing in under 40 minutes. When he was done, he handed me a small brass key with an engraved tag and said, "Only 2 copies. You've got full control." I paid in cash, requested a written receipt, and added it to the binder, which now filled an entire drawer. Harold sent over the final amendment to my estate plan just before noon. I signed it while seated at my kitchen table, the same one Simone once used to sort through luxury catalogs like she was owed every item. The document was clear. All prior beneficiaries removed, a new trust established, my medical directives assigned to a neutral fiduciary, no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Reverend Clarence dropped by around 2 with a slice of sweet potato pie in a foil wrap and a single envelope in hand. "You've had your courtroom," he said. "Now let the peace come in." Inside the envelope was a card. Simple, navy, no signature on the front. Inside it read, "She didn't win. You reclaimed what was already yours." I didn't cry. I cleaned. I gathered every photo Simone had framed in my guest unit, every designer box she'd left, stashed behind the linen closet, and placed them in a black donation bag. The doorman helped me carry it to the loading dock without asking who it belonged to. At 4:47 p.m., Olivia emailed confirmation that the final reversal had cleared. Total restitution, $132,414.92, plus interest. Funds secured in a protected account under my sole management. The Chase Trust officer would follow up monthly. I stood by the window as dusk folded over the city. Below me, traffic moved like it always had. Unbothered, unchanged. But something had shifted. In the paperwork, yes, but more in my posture, my breath, my threshold for being reduced. The new key was cold in my hand. When I slid it into the lock and turned it, the click echoed through the hall like punctuation.